There were 470 games released on the Atari 2600 from 1977 to 1992. Last time we looked at the best of the best. This time we're going to focus on the worst of the worst. The complete crap that's been baking in the hot sun. These games could be used to torture prisoners and terrorists. If you are overly sensitive to terrible games, you are urged to look away and maybe go watch the last official top 10, the best 2600 games. Without any more delay, here are the official top 10 worst 2600 games. Number 10, Home Run. This is one of the first baseball games ever released, and it shows. The game layout is so simple. There's a green screen, 4 white squares for bases, and you and your opponent. This game is so simple it can't even follow the basic rules of baseball. Nobody covers the bases. There's no catcher or umpire. There's nobody in the outfield or infield. The pitcher must do everything. Some of the other basic rules apply: 3 strikes for an out and 4 balls for a walk. Defense is vastly overpowered on the easier difficulty, so make sure you flip the difficulty to make it more fair. Hitting the home run is very strange. The game only recognizes it if you hit the ball exactly straight down. 3 strikes. This game is out. Number 9. Flag Capture. This is a pretty poor excuse for a retail game, about as bad as if Tic-Tac-Toe was on the system. They do have a 3D Tic-Tac-Toe, and that game is pretty bad, but it does something new and kind of clever, so it stays off this list. If this is something you can play at home with some scissors and paper, it's technically a video game, as you play for a goal. The goal is to get the flag in as few moves as possible against your opponent. There are different modes. One mode has the flag moving around, which makes it a guessing game. The main mode is to get 15 points before your opponent. Some of the tiles have bombs. If a bomb goes off, you go back to your starting space. This game is dry and boring. Minesweeper is much better than this. If you want to play a decent version of this type of game, play Minesweeper. Number 8. Pac-Man. Oh my god. This port of the original Pac-Man is terrible. It's actually an unfinished game. They gave the designer very little time to make it, and it shows. This is the original Pac-Man. This is the Atari 2600 version of Pac-Man. This is the official worst version of Pac-Man. The maze really is just so boring, and the ghosts are awful. They flicker in and out when you eat a power pellet. They don't even have an indication of when they are turning back to normal. This version has many more cheap deaths. Its worst sin is just how boring it is. If there was more time, the developer could have done a decent job of turning this into something playable. Miss Pac-Man is one of the better games on the system, although even that isn't a great representation of the game. Number 7. Starfox. No, this isn't the beloved Nintendo franchise. Same name, different game. This is a defender-like shooter. You fly around to collect crystals and blast enemy ships. The game, as you see, looks amazingly bland. Your main objective is to collect crystals, for reasons. I guess they had to come up with something. There's only one enemy ship on screen at a time, but that's actually a positive because the game moves way too fast. You can't move correctly to aim and shoot. It's really awful. If the game were slowed to a reasonable speed, the game would still be bad. It's very bland. It's really so simple, there's not much to say. Moving on. Number 6. Sorcerer. You play as a sorcerer that battles wizards and creatures that are probably summoned by the wizards and take their jewels. You have a floating platform that you ride on and you shoot lasers at bizarre creatures. They often come in groups of 3, and they come in formation. If you shoot one, they all die. That's Sorcerer. It has a little more imagination than many 2600 games, but that doesn't really help it here. Sorcerer versus wizards and collecting their magic items or jewels. It's just the beginning of a story, but not much else. It's just bare bones in a dry desert. What else is there to say? My god, let's just move on. Number 5. Firefly. You play as a firefly. You fly around in gardens. Screens with black backgrounds and a few flowers on the ground. You fire at groups of enemies that often fly in formations in rows of 3. They drop treasure. If this sounds familiar to a couple other games on this list, it's because it's basically a reskin of Sorcerer. You'd be forgiven if you forgot I talked about that game a minute ago. There's very little to remember about these unremarkable games. Firefly is absolute trash, and that's where we are with these games now. These are the games you torture prisoners with. They are the games you play when you need to punish yourself. These are the self-harm, plain and simple now. These are the games that really just won't die. They're so evil. If you or anyone you know voluntarily playing any game on this list for any reason other than educational purposes, then please call the doctor. You need help. Number 4. The Sword Quest Trilogy. This one is cheating somewhat, but it makes sense here. These 3 games are bound together by the power of marketing, and that bond won't and can't be broken. The thing about this entry is it isn't just about the games. The games themselves are a mixed bag. They are too ambitious and cryptic for the simple Atari 2600. This may have worked better in the next generation with the NES and the Master System. These games weren't released as a normal store retail item. You had to join the Atari fan club and then buy the game on special order. The most notable thing about this trilogy is the contest that backed it. Each game was to be a huge event. The best players would get together and have a competition. The winner of the competition would get a special item worth over $25,000. There were supposed to be 4 games to the set. Each game would have a special prize. Then the winners from the 4 games would compete for an ultimate prize. Enough skimming the surface. Let's talk a bit about the contest and the games themselves. This is the most ambitious promotional thing that was ever done with the Atari 2600. It may be the most ambitious promotional stunt for any game, ever. This was either going to be legendary awesome or a complete train wreck. It's on the worst top game list, so let's take a look at this train wreck. The 3 released games were Earthworld, Fireworld, and Waterworld. There was a winner for the first 2 games. But by the time the 3rd game was released in 1983, the video game crash was in full effect, and Atari was getting hit hard. Waterworld was released, but the contest never happened for that one. Earthworld had a winner, and the prize was an 18-karat gold talisman. It was studded with 12 diamonds, and the 12 stones for all the zodiac signs. The contest was in full swing, and everybody was pumped for the next game. Fireworld. The winner of Fireworld got a chalice made of gold and platinum. It was studded with diamonds, rubies, sapphires, pearls, and green jade. Imagine breaking that out when you're having some beers with your friends. Hey Jim, I don't have any clean cups, but you can use this old chalice. The Waterworld prize would have been a gold crown with jewels, and there was an unreleased game called Airworld. With that game, you would have got a gold Philosopher's Stone with jewels. Then there was the ultimate prize. All the previous winners would come back and try to win the sword. The sword has an 18-karat gold handle with jewels all over. The blade was pure silver. It was valued at $50,000. And it never happened. Only the first 2 prizes were released. The remaining prizes were heavily rumored to end up in the hands of a man named Jack Tramiel. At the time of the contest, Atari was not doing well. The company was bought by a man named Jack Tramiel. There was a long saga about this, and it's much too involved for a simple top 10 list. I would suggest watching the Jack Tramiel videos by Kim Justice. Each game came with a comic by DC Comics that gave a story for each of the games. In the games, there were hints that lead to specific panels in the comics. Drawn into the panels is a word. Some words are useful, and some aren't. You must play the game and get all the hints, then decide which words to use and mail the results, and hope you got it right and get a call back. The games are pretty much set up the same. You play as Mr. Some Guy and go from room to room. You find items along the way. You put the right items in the right rooms and you get hints. This is what I was talking about with the comics. The hints point to the panels, and you find the hidden word. There are little mini-games spread throughout. They range from horrible to decent, but nothing really good. This is a weird one. There's so much about this game and contest that's really cool, but none of it has to do with the games themselves. The games are pretty bad. Even though the games are bad, there's the cool concept about crossing over with a comic book, and that's pretty cool. The contest was a great concept, and they gave away 2 of the 5 prizes, so it's not a total loss. But not completing the contest really tarnishes this series. This could have been an honorable mention for the top 10 if they went through with the contest, but now it's in the bottom 5. Number 3. Skeet Shoot. Skeet Shoot does a pretty good job of portraying the sport it's based on. That's the best thing I can think of to say about this game. There's nothing about the sport of skeet shooting that really works for the main concept of a video game. You shoot at a single flying target, one at a time. The skeets. You shoot at them. If you hit the target, you get a point. Okay, moving on. Number 2. Karate. This is quite possibly the worst fighting game ever made. It may also be the first. All I can really say about this is stay away. If you attempt to play this, your brain will start to turn to mush. You will lose motor control. If you attempt to play longer than a half an hour, your bowels will be next. It's best to just stay away. This game just looks awful. It's a 2600 game, so that point could be forgiven if it had something fun in its gameplay. It doesn't. It really doesn't. There is no redeeming this horrid, putrid mess of a fighting game. You have no idea if your attack or your opponent's attack will connect. It's just a hit a button and hope for the best. You get 4 attacks: high punch, high kick, low punch, low kick. This game sucks souls, plain and simple. Play this game for a while and you may just lose your mind. The cure is any other fighting game. If you find someone who played this game too long and can't speak in sentences anymore, get any other fighting game in their hands, and they should recover quickly. Number 1. Slot Machine. There's certain things that are out of consideration for real criticism. The basic programming cart is an example. It's not a game, it's something to program with in BASIC. It's fine for what it is. There's the kids' educational titles like Basic Math. It's not really a game, it's a learning tool. These carts aren't in consideration for this list. Slot Machine is technically a game. You play a slot machine at casinos and other gambling establishments. It can be fun because you have a chance to win money. The basic concept of a slot machine is probably the laziest, stupidest idea to translate into a main concept for a full game. One slot machine to play for eternity that gives out nothing, no stakes, and no fun. This game is the literal embodiment of hell.